Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
Like this week's Torah portion, Deuteronomy 11 and Psalm 106 know about an insurrection, a rebellion, but they don't seem to know about Korah.
In this week's Torah Pearls, Aaron achieves expiation for the people with incense. But how many bloodless rituals of expiation are there in the Tanakh?
So over and over, we have the three sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Or is it Gershom? Gershon, Gershom.
Just how many times did Jehovah speak directly to Aaron in the Torah?
I'm really confused. Did the earth swallow Korah and all of his household? Or not everybody?
In Numbers chapter 17, the story of Aaron's rod that budded, how many staffs did Moses collect? 12 or 13?
All right, Jono, let's jump in, man.
Ready to go. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth number 2, letter U.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the Horeb Institute, all the way from Louisiana, is the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross K. Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hey, Jono, how are you, my friend?
I am thrilled. You know why I'm thrilled. We can't talk about it now, but
right.
As we all know, there's a lot going on in the world, and frankly, I think it's all good. It's remarkable. We live in incredibly historic times, and as I've said many times lately, if this is not a fulfillment of prophecy, Ross, then what is? Then nothing is, quite frankly.
Lots going on in the world. I'm with you. We were just talking about it's hard to keep up, and it's like every minute something new's coming across on X or Facebook or who knows, man. It's hard to follow.
Yep. Yeah, I hope it continues. It's all going.
We hope that it continues, because the more that it does and the more these things get ironed out, the better it is for Tanakh tours. So
it is, and for people to, as the prophecy says, to the nations to flock to Jerusalem. And as they were in 2019 and setting records, and people, coming and saying, as it says, show us the Torah, teach us the Torah of the Lord. And, we want that to continue, and it is continuing. I mean, just yesterday, news came out that Texas had passed that law saying, we're going to put the 10 Commandments back into the classrooms. Great step in the right direction. I hope that becomes contagious. And
we'll have to do another show on that. We're going to have to do another show, because we did a show when the Louisiana law passed, but we'll get into that. That's going to be a whole show. We need to really buckle down and do it.
And I remember it wasn't that long ago that we did a show on that. And so that was about Louisiana. I was trying to remember, because James, who gave me this poster, g'day James, mentioned something about that. We should do a show, because his question was, well, which one edition of the 10 Commandments is going to be in there? We actually did a show on that. We do have to, there's so much going on, dear viewers. We're going to catch up on that. We should do a show separate to Torah Pearls. But of course, we are in Torah Pearls right now. This is season 3 of Torah Pearls, and we are now in Korah. Oh my goodness, Numbers chapter 16 and on through to the end of 18. And
great stories in this reading.
We're back to some really cool narratives, instead of, 3 ephahs of flour and whatever it is, and the fat and the blood and the cows and everything. So we're out of that, and we're into some cool stories now. So we are joined, of course, by our AI critical scholar, Ezra. Ezra, come on, give us an academic summary of Korah.
All right, let's dive into Parashat Korah, a portion that reads like political drama wrapped in ancient priestly rhetoric. At its heart, the narrative revolves around Korah, a Levite, who mounts a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. He's not alone. Dathan, Abiram, and 250 other chieftains join in, challenging the centralized authority that, by this point in the Torah, has been tightly knit around the Aaronide priesthood. Korah's claim that the entire congregation is holy, not just a select few. Sounds democratic, but the text responds with divine fire and the earth swallowing people alive. Now, text critically speaking, many scholars read this episode as a composite of at least 3 originally distinct rebellion stories. One features Korah challenging Aaron's priestly monopoly. Another has Dathan and Abiram opposing Moses' political leadership. And then there's the 250 incense bearers, possibly a vestige of a non-Aaronide priestly group being written out of the cultic picture. From a documentary hypothesis lens, This section likely combines priestly and earlier non-priestly strands, which would explain some of the tensions and duplications in the narrative. For instance, the emphasis on incense offering and priestly hierarchy aligns well with P's agenda to establish Aaronide supremacy after the Babylonian exile. In short, Korah's story isn't just a rebellion, it's a polemic, a theological turf war dressed as divine judgment, where narrative serves the purpose of validating one group's exclusive access to the sanctuary at the expense of competing claims. And that, folks, makes it one of the Torah's more explosive chapters, literally.
Hey, Jono, listen, I don't know if you've ever seen this. When Ezra said a political drama wrapped in ancient priestly rhetoric, I had this flashback to the movie, I think it's JFK, where Joe Pesci takes a real hard drag on his cigarette, and he says, "You have no idea. It's a mystery wrapped up in an enigma surrounded by a riddle," or something like that.
Right.
And that's
a great line.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to take a quick drag on my smoke. You have no idea, man. You're in deep. All right, we're in deep. We're in deep into the priestly literature, and there does seem to be a mixture, doesn't there?
There does seem to be. So this appears to be a conglomerate of two sources. So the commentaries say, and Richard Elliott Freeman says, well, this is a combination of J and P. Interestingly, everyone agrees it kicks off with P, and that part of the narrative seems to be, Ross, an attack from the Aaronide priesthood upon the Korahite Levites to make sure that they know their place. You know, they're subordinate. They're under us. We are the holiest of holy, the Aaronites, Aaron and his sons. And you guys, you better make sure you know where you are in the pecking order. And that's what it seems to be here. But there's also another version of this story that wants to demonize the Reubenites. And that, according to Richard Elliott Freeman, is from J. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, so let me touch on that. That's an excellent point. So if you go back right before chapter 16, say 1532, that's where P begins. All right, and then it goes all the way down, and then the first part of 16, now Korah, the son of Issachar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, that's P.
Yeah.
And then let me just read P just for a minute, just to show people what we're talking about. So now Korah, the son of Issachar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, took men, 250 princes of the congregation, called of the assembly men of renown. Now, people with the Torah tablet can do this by just simply looking at the tablet. And look at that, yeah. Now, if you look at J adds Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelat, the son of Reuben. It sounds like, and it feels like two different sources here.
Yeah.
But let me make one quick point about, you go, some people just think they're making this up, Jono. Like, how do they, why are they saying that it's made up? And here's one of the main reasons. And I'll just say it like this. In Deuteronomy knows about this rebellion too, in Deuteronomy chapter 11. And Psalm 106 knows about a rebellion, an insurrection. But in both of those cases, it doesn't say it was Dathan and Abiram and the sons of Kohath, the son of Levi, the sons of Eliab, and it only knows of this Reubenite rebellion. So I just want people to know that. So when a scholar looks at these, they go, hey, wait a minute. Why does Deuteronomy not know about the sons of Korah? Deuteronomy doesn't mention anything about Korah being involved in a rebellion.
And of course, and you mentioned and you're saying that the Psalms do not know about Korah being involved in the rebellion either. And we know that the sons of Korah actually contribute significantly to the Psalms. Isn't that right?
Yep, that's right. That's right. Now, it just so happens, now that, when you said that, I thought, oh my goodness. Just so people know, because they're going to get excited, we're going to talk about the Psalms of the sons of Korah. 106 is not one attributed to them, but I will say that if people want to study the rebellions that take place here in chapter 16 through 18 of Numbers, They ought to look at Deuteronomy 11 and they ought to look at Psalm 106 because it clearly knows about part of this rebellion. Part of it doesn't, Jono.
Right. So there you go. And now, just while we were talking about the Deuteronomy and the Torah tablets, let me just say that the Deuteronomy Torah tablet is available. Where can people get that? Because we're going to be ripping through numbers pretty quickly, and you're going to want to have this ready to go when we get there. So just remind everyone how they can get it.
We're going to make it real easy for them, Jono. It's going to be in the description of the video. While you and I are talking, they can simply look down. No, don't do it while we're talking. Wait until we're done. Look in the description, and there you'll find it. Or go to rossknichols.com. Front page. There it is.
Beautiful. So, 16:2-3. So, given what we know about the rise of the Sacrificial Institute, Ross, and the late date of the priestly material, the complaint cited in verse 3 may well have originated legitimately in Israelite history. So, what I mean by that is when you analyze the question that the complaint and the question that the Korahites or the Reubenites, or both of them, according to this narrative, arise, I have to say, it's a question I would ask. They say this. They ask, "You take too much upon you." They say to Aaron, and they're really saying Aaron,
Moses and Aaron.
Moses says, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, sure, they're set apart, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of sitting here thinking,
you're cheering them on. You would have been, you would have been in the company of Korah. I can feel it.
Well, I think there's an argument to be made. I don't know that I would have started up a competing tabernacle, which they may have done, and we'll see that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But the question itself is, hang on, Aaron, and you, Aaron, I had priesthood. Where do you get off? Being in charge of this whole thing and elevating yourself above us. I mean,
who made you chief above us?
Yeah.
Hey, does it feel like Moses and does it feel like Aaron and Miriam just a few chapters back? It almost feels like one of the themes in the book of Numbers is you keep your place, stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Don't
It is
push
very
things.
much. It's very much stay in your lane. It really is. So I have to say, familiarizing myself with the Moses Scroll, Ross, and with the documentary hypothesis, it's a question that I too would be asking. So in verse 7, this is interesting, 16:7, the man whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the Holy One. It's a little bit like, what was that movie? The guys with the swords, there can be only one.
Oh, yeah. I know.
What was that? Highlander.
Yeah.
Only one.
Yeah.
That's great. In this case, the one is it Aaron or is it Moses? It's Aaron.
Hey, 1 second. I'm sorry. You brought up a key part of chapter of verse 7. There can only be one. But just before you go further with that, what you said in verse 3, you take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation. In Hebrew, that's rav lakim. Much is to you. Like it's going, oh, you've got all the big stuff, Moses and Aaron. And now notice that the same exact Hebrew phrase is here in verse 7. Ye take too much upon you, you sons of Levi. So it's a claim, a counterclaim. So it's funny. Most people miss this in English, but in Hebrew, the sons of Korah tell Moses and Aaron, Rav Lakim, you take too much on yourself. And then Moses spins it around on him in verse 7, and he says, no. Much is to you, you sons of Levi.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway.
And Moses said, no, quite right. It says further to Korah, okay, hear me, sons of Levi. So what he sets up is this is the showdown of the censers. Is that what this is? Of the Firepans?
Well, yeah, it gets into that. Yeah, we're not there yet, though, are we? We ready to roll in there?
Not quite, but he says we're gonna set that up. The man whom God will choose. Yeah, quite right. You have gone too far, you sons of Levi. 16:13-14. All of a sudden, Egypt is a land flowing with milk and honey, Ross.
Yeah, let me add something in here too, because one of the things that strikes me about this whole thing, and the reason that both sort of have a case. If you say the sons of Levi, the descendants of Kohath, have maybe a legitimate complaint, I think they do, and part of that goes back to it's a clash of the Levitical clans going on here.
Yep.
And what you're really dealing with is Levi has these sons, these three sons, and everybody knows Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. Well, basically, it's clashing cousins, really. Because both Moses, Aaron, and this Korah guy are all Kohathites. They all descend from Kohath. But by this point, and particularly by the end of this Torah portion, we're going to be dealing with it's only the sons of Aaron. So what seems to be, if you're a Korahite, a son of Korah, and you are one of these who are tasked with the holiest items, and I just jotted these verses down, Numbers 3:31, and Numbers 4:4, and Numbers 7:9, it basically says that the duties and responsibilities of the Kohathites, they're the ones who do the holiest things in all the tabernacle. Right. So they carry the ark. So anytime you read about the Levites who carry the ark, so for instance, Deuteronomy 31, and Moses gave the little scroll to those who carry the ark, the Levites who carry. Well, that's not any old Levite. That's not a Gershonite. It's not a Merari, descendant of Merari. It's clearly a Korahite, a Kohathite, I should say. So anyway, my main point is that it's a very specific duty, and they have the best, the choice, the most important. But however, this is what gets me. They have to sit outside until the sons of Aaron come in and put covers over everything. It's like you're not holy enough to touch the ark or you can't see it. We'll let you carry it. How about that? See, so there's a little bit.
We don't want to do that.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the guys, descendants of Korah, are like these son of a guns, man? These,
yeah. And you have to read. Just remind everybody, you have to read this from the perspective that the priestly material is being written much later. You just mentioned Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy barely mentions Aaron.
That's right.
As you said in Deuteronomy chapter 31, Moses hands the scroll to the Korahites and says, "Go put this with the ark."
Yep.
They're handling that. The sons of Aaron are not a focus at all. And what we're seeing here is a much later attempt of the priestly material to write them into the Mosaic narrative, to make them very, very special, to give them Mosaic authority, if not divine authority. Perhaps they're even more important than Moses, because remember, Moses is not an Aaron. He's as you just pointed out, he's of this tribe, this sub-tribe. So,
by the way, one other point.
Competing priesthood. Go ahead.
Yeah, one other point. You mentioned about how Aaron is hardly mentioned in Deuteronomy. This is something our viewers may or may not know, that when it talks about the priest, the Tetrateuch, or primarily from Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, it's all priest means sons of Levi, sons of Aaron, right? Not just Levites. It's got to be a son of Aaron. But in Deuteronomy does not know about a son of Aaron. In Deuteronomy, it says the priest, the Levites. HaKohanim, HaLeviim. They're Levitical priests. They're nothing
That's
about
right.
the sons of Aaron. To your point.
Very good. So Moses calls some of them. They say, "We won't come. It is not enough that he brought us out of the land flowing with milk and honey, Egypt, but you would also lord it over us. Well, you're going to be prince over us." And this takes us back to Exodus, doesn't it? When the Israelites say to Moses, after he knocks off one of the Egyptian soldiers, buries him in the sand, who made you prince over us? What, are you going to be right? You're going to lord it over us now? So they're really, really pushing it. And then we find ourselves, yes, we do, the showdown of the Firepans, Ross.
Man.
Everyone's got a censer.
Showdown of the Firepans.
They've got.
Does this remind you of Leviticus 10 and the two
doesn't
boys?
And there is a lot to parallel with Leviticus chapter 10 and Nadab and Abihu, whom Jehovah ate, because either they brought strange fire or they just came too close. There are two reasons given, depending on which.
They were drinking in the,
or they were drinking, or
drinking in the
whatever
tent.
it might be. There's a few different reasons, but it results in 16:19. We have another theophany. So God appears to the whole community, Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Stand back from this community that I may annihilate them in an instant." Okay, we're going to come back to that. But they fell on their faces. Now, they have to get out of the way. God's saying, hey, you guys get out of the way, because what I do is fire will shoot out from the ark, out of the Holy of Holies, and I will eat them, as I've done so many times before. Mm-hmm. And they say, "Oh God, source of the breath of all flesh." What do you have? This is verse
Oh God,
22.
the God of the spirits of all flesh. By the way, this is only twice in all the Hebrew Bible, if I'm not mistaken, and both times it's in this chapter, if I'm not mistaken. It's very close. Somewhere else in Numbers, Yeah,
we have a few interesting titles, but just going back, Ross, before when he says to them, like, get out of the way because I want to eat everyone, and because he wants to annihilate them in an instant. Go ahead.
In an instant, you and I were talking about this. Let me just pull up my notes here. The consuming in a moment. Right before we came on, we discussed this. And maybe we'll look at this together. But in Numbers 16, 20 through 22, you just read it. Verse 21 is the first occurrence, that I may consume them in a moment, says the ASV. Now look down at verse 45, and I think in the Hebrew it's going to be different. Now, if you have a Torah tablet, it's fine because you'll have the Hebrew and the English.
I'm just going to switch there now.
It's 17, verse 10. In the Hebrew, right?
So just so before you start, just so everybody knows, there is some crazy stuff going on between chapters between the Hebrew and the English, and when you get to chapter 17 in the Hebrew, it's actually going to continue as 16 in the English, but not to fear, because you do have both.
That's
in
right.
the Torah tablet, it'll tell you exactly
if you have
where
a
you
Torah
are.
tablet, if you have a Torah tablet when you're listening to us, you go to the Numbers Torah tablet and you look at page 134, and there it says, and Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, "Get you up from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And they fell upon their faces. There's that idea. It's like it's a rapid, fast cook. The fire is about to come and come quickly. Now, the other passage in the English Bible is Exodus chapter 33 and verse 5. Exodus 33, 5. So I guess I can flip open to there just for a moment. But we also want to look at the Moses scroll. Exodus 33, 5. I think it's just the same.
The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelite people, you're a stiff-necked people. If I were to go in your midst for one moment, I would destroy you." So there we go. Have it again.
I would destroy you. And that's the same, just for a moment. And so the idea is a quick destruction. And the reason that we were talking about this is because in the Moses scroll, that same phrase appears. Where is it, Jono? It's in GB 7, right?
7 to 9, I do believe, if I remember correctly.
GB 7. Okay, here's what I have.
He says, "Go up and possess the land, and you were rebellious against your Elohim, and you did not go up, and you did not hearken to his voice. And Elohim said to me that he intended to destroy you. But I interceded, standing on your behalf in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights on your behalf. And Elohim hearkened also at that time and did not destroy you in a moment."
In a moment. There it is. And I just put the footnote, the destruction of Israel in a moment. Resh, Gimel, Ayin is threatened elsewhere in the Bible. See Exodus 33, 5, number 16, 21, and 45. So it's just a point. I just wanted to make the point that there seems to be this idea of moment, Resh, Gimel, Ayin, and it's in the Moses scroll, it's in the Pentateuch. So what do we do with that? I don't know. But it's there.
So what we have in 16 is, let me read from the King James, 16:23 to 24, speak to the congregation, saying, "Get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." And I like this translation because what it does suggest is, and it does say tents, but what it does suggest is that they have set up an alternative tabernacle, and they're saying, "Hey, we're Korah. You take too much upon yourself, Moses and Aaron. Where everyone is holy." They're not just saying we're the special ones too. They're saying, "Is not everyone holy? Is not Jehovah among everybody? Why do you elevate yourself above everyone?" And it seems like they have started a new political party, so to speak, that says, you are all able to speak with God, to God, and
you're not
these guys
special. Who made you?
Yeah,
Who made you?
And you
over
guys
us?
are not special. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, but with some, maybe not in the best way. So 1626, it doesn't work out well for them, Ross. And
it does not.
So he addressed the community saying, "Move away from the tents of these wicked men and touch nothing." Now, this is interesting. Touch nothing that belongs to them, Ross, lest you be wiped out for all of their sins. It's a real contradiction from the majority of theology that we get from the Torah thus far, where, going right back to Abraham, would you, destroy the innocent with the wicked? Far be it from you to do such a thing.
Shall not the judge of all the earth do justice? Shall
exactly. Yeah. And yet here we have it. And even worse than that, we have in verse 27, now Dathan and Abiram had to come out. They stood out at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. And Moses said, "By this you shall know that it was the Lord who sent me to do all of these things, that they are not of my own devising. If any of these men die, as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord does a new thing, Ross, that's a phrase that we hear a lot in the church. The Lord is doing a new thing. Well, the new thing that he does here is that he opens up the earth and swallows. It is a new thing, I have to say. Swallows these guys and apparently their wives and their children and their little ones, and they all go down alive into Sheol. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think I'm thinking what you're thinking. So, first of all, to that idea of what did their kids do? I mean, are their kids punished for the sins of the fathers?
Not the God of all the earth do
justly. Imagine little, as you always say, little Jimmy, and because his dad bowed up on Moses, he gets consumed in an earthquake, and he might have grown up to be, I don't know, a great singer for Israel. How do we know?
That's right.
I mean, think about it. Yeah, I mean, but wait, what if some of these kids would turn out to be something good in life?
Of course.
Go ahead,
I am adamantly opposed to this narrative and what it implies about the God of creation. I think it does a great injustice. Now, what I was going to say was, where are we geographically? Just remind me where we are geographically at the moment.
Well, we're on the way, obviously, from the wilderness of Paran. And remember, just in the last Torah portion, we were at Kadesh. And, it's from Kadesh. So we're already situated at that place, is the way I understand it. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. And because you're never quite sure where exactly we're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard.
But I think
the last mention was that's where they were.
But the concept of being swallowed by the earth, we see where that probably came from, because when we are traveling on Tanakh tours down by the Dead Sea, what we see all over the place are sinkholes. Yeah. And the areas that you can go are very, very specific, and the areas that you cannot go are very well marked out. and those areas are subject to sinkholes. And what happens is that the fresh water that drains through the hills, the mountains there, that seep down into the earth and towards the Dead Sea, dissolves away the salt, which is just an amazing amount of salt, obviously, in the Dead Sea and in the soil around it, and eventually causes cavities and creates these massive sinkholes. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is where the idea came from. That concept gets incorporated here.
Yeah, that entire region, as you know, from east to west in a swath and much to the south. Once you get to that point geographically on the lines as you work your way down into the Negev, that desert is a very, very rough terrain. And like you said, you've got sinkholes around the Dead Sea, and even way to the west where you're at Kadesh, where they think Kadesh is, you've got these deep, deep grooves cut into the ravines, basically, and so it's easy to say. And then not to mention the fact that, of course, the whole rift, the great African rift that forms what is now known as, the whole from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Arava, all that's because there is a great fault line there. So we have faults, and so it's not unreasonable to think that an earthquake really did happen. And here we've got that the earthquake causes the earth to open up, and it eats all these bad people.
It eats all the bad people. And it happened in recent history, too, in Miami. Or was it Miami? Somewhere in Florida where they have a lot of sinkholes. Do you remember that story where Jimmy's on his bed in his bedroom and all of a sudden the ground opens up below him and swallows him, literally swallows him.
What was his dad doing? What was his dad doing?
I don't know that he was there, but his brother came rushing in and actually jumped down into the hole to try and find him.
I didn't hear that story.
It was an amazing story, I tell you, but it was one such example.
I'm just saying that.
I mean, what a horrific way to go.
But, I'm just saying that the father must have done something for the boy to be eaten in the earth or something.
I don't know, but this is the situation, and this is what the priestly writer is attributing to God, or to Jehovah specifically. Verse 34: all Israel around them fled at their shrieks of them going down alive into the earth, for they said the earth might swallow us, so that they've run away. And then at this point, just when you think that it's all done and dusted and it's all dealt with, the end of at least chapter 16 in the Hebrew, verse 35, says, and a fire went forth from the Lord and consumed. He ate once again 250 men offering the incense. And to your point earlier on, this is an incredible parallel to what happens specifically with Nadab and Abihu in chapter 10, where they come in with their censers and God consumes them. He eats them. So this is where we find ourselves now. Right here in the Hebrew, it switches to chapter 17. So if I'm referring to chapter 17, you can refer to the English designation of these verses.
But just to make the point, I'm sorry, just to make the point, what we understand based on like the beginning of verse 27 and following, particularly verse 32, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households, and all the men that appertained unto Korah and all their goods. So I get the impression here that it's the whole clan.
It would appear so. And yet we know that that's not the case, because sons of Korah show up with beautiful songs later on in history. So, and yet there seems to be, whenever this was written, it's just making sure that they put the Levites in that place and just be reminded, you guys, you're under us, and don't be trying to squirm your way out of that. So, chapter 17 in the Hebrew. We get into a bit of recycling, Ross. Recycling is always good, isn't it? Yeah. So what they do is they say, okay, now get all those firepans of those 250 men that just were consumed by Jehovah, because the firepans, they're holy things, and once they're holy, they're holy. We should use them for something good, and so they made the what did they make, Ross? They made
Don't they put it on the covering for the altar?
Covering of the altar. And this seems
beaten
to
plates.
Beaten plates and a little bit of recycling. It seems to me like they already have, whenever this was written, they have this covering for the altar, the copper covering around the altar, and they're saying, you see where that comes from? Well, that's actually from the 250 censers of the Levites, and there it is, kind of as a memorial to you Levites. Just remember what happened, back then.
And you can imagine the sons of Aaron telling that story, right? You can imagine
really,
the sons of Aaron saying, "Hey, Levites, I just want to remind you that the last time somebody challenged our authority, they were eaten into the earth, and these are the evidences of them." And the Levites were like, "Oh my goodness, I better straighten up." Yeah.
So the priestly writer offers an origin narrative that was retrojected here, and we'll see that again when we get to chapter 21, when and in this case I think it's E says, "Oh yeah, this copper snake that we've been worshiping, and in ritual and whatnot." Well, that actually also goes back all the way to Moses. Let me tell you the story about that. We'll get there soon enough. Now, is there anything else that you want to?
I think we've covered that part really well. The main point through all of this is that you've got this very clearly communicated story that the focus is shifting. It reminds me, I'm sorry, but it reminds me of the gospel narratives where John must decrease and Jesus had to increase. The Levites had to decrease and the sons of Aaron had to increase. It's like, it really is. The writers want us to know that the Levites are just their helper bees. That's all they are.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, it is fascinating, though, Ross, that the people, as I mentioned, they all run away and they go, "Oh, the earth might swallow us. We're really scared. This is just a really scary thing." But then it says in chapter 17, verse 6, the next day, day, the whole Israelite community railed against Moses and Aaron, saying, You two have brought death upon the Lord's people. Now, they're referring to not just everyone that went down into the pit, but the 250 men that God consumed, that Jehovah consumed. And they gathered again. There's an uprising, Ross. Can you believe it?
I can.
And then there's another theophany. Now, this is interesting. The presence of the Lord appeared again in front of everyone. And now get this doesn't make any sense. When, like any of this does, but then verse 8, when Moses and Aaron reached the tent of meeting, meaning this is where God has revealed himself, and they've removed themselves from the complaints of the people, and they've gone over to the tent. Yeah. And yet this is what Jehovah says to them one more again, remove yourself from this community, which they just did, that I may annihilate them in an instant, which you were referring to.
Yeah.
And they fell on their faces. Now, what it suggests to me is perhaps they are standing between the Holy of Holies and the people that are behind them. And perhaps Jehovah is saying to them, get out of the way so I can shoot my fire at them and consume them in a moment.
Oh, okay.
And they do fall on their faces as if to say, maybe you want to go over the top of us. And then Moses said to, and now I have to say, I really do love the narrative. I love the way that this reads.
Yeah.
When you read it, you get a sense of haste. The sentences are short. The actions are quick. Everything about this is rush, 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 because he's already eating people. And his wrath is going to blaze forth and take out, like when he did the 250 people, like when he did Nadab and Abihu. But in this case, Ross, it is when he did in chapter 11, verse 33. Instead of fire coming out and eating the people, here fire, the wrath blazes forth and causes a plague. This is what happened in chapter 11, verse 33. There is a plague among the people. And so what happens is Moses says to Aaron, quickly, as if we all know that this is the remedy, put some incense in a fire pan, rush out among the people, and deal with this because the plague has already begun.
Yeah.
And Aaron does this, and he rushes out, and it says he makes expiation.
Right.
He makes expiation on their behalf. And verse 12, he took it as Moses ordered. He ran into the midst of the congregation where the plague had begun, and among the people, and he put on the incense and made expiation for the people. He stood between the dead and the living until the plague was checked.
Wow.
It is a spectacular. Those that died, Ross, in the plague came to 14,700, aside from those who died on the account of Korah. Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting since the plague was checked. Now, this is one of, and we'll do this very quickly because we don't have much time, but this is one of 6.5, what I like to call 6.5 bloodless expiation rituals. Now, people might be able to think of more. If you can think of more, please put it in the comments section. I'd love to have a look at that. But let me just quickly give it to you. What we have is flour. Flour can be used to make expiation. That's Leviticus chapter 5, verses 11 to 13. No blood sacrifice. The scapegoat, we talked about that for Azazel. Leviticus chapter 16, verse 10, that goat is not sacrificed. That's a bloodless expiation. Incense, right here, Numbers chapter 17, verse 12, is used, and it does achieve expiation for the people. Words, we have in 1 Kings 8, 46 to 50, Solomon saying, hey, this temple, so great. And when people are praying towards this place, please hear their prayers and accept their repentance, so on and so forth. We even have Hezekiah in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verse 18 to 20, which I think you referred to a couple of Torah portions ago, where there are people who have observed, was it the second Passover or the Passover, and they weren't in a state of cleanness, and he prays for them. He prays on their behalf, words of repentance, and God, it says, the narrative says, accepted that, and that was fine. And then Hosea chapter 14, verses 1 to 4, where the people prophetically return, and they take words with them instead of bulls, and words of repentance. Then we have the Levitical substitution for the firstborn. We talked about that recently, Numbers chapter 8, verses 13 to 21. They are used as expiation for the sin of being a firstborn. And then the half, Ross, is Isaiah, right? Isaiah chapter 6, verse 7, where he is expiated with a burning coal that touches his lips from one of the seraphim. But I say this is half because this is a vision. How do we...
You give it half credit.
I give it half credit, so there it is. But there we go. So this is one of those. Now, what else? Where are we now, Ross? Is there anything else that you want to highlight?
Well, I want to bring Ezra in, but I want to bring Ezra in for some explanatory things, but primarily around the genealogies, which, because before we leave that too fast, speaking of fast, I wanted to ask Ezra something about these names. And the reason, and I don't know if it goes here or somewhere else, but I just keep thinking about, you have the sons of Levi, and one of them is Gershon, or is it Gershon? Because sometimes the name is spelled differently, and I don't know if you notice that, but you have Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, and I wanted to bring in Ezra and ask specifically about that. Is this as good a place to do it as any? Or because we're kind of at a break now to move into before we get into chapter 18, right? Well, the reason I want to do it now is because before we get into the sons of Aaron, let's look just a little bit about this. So Ezra, help us understand why we have the three sons of Aaron, the three sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, and sometimes we see the name Gershon spelled with an N, Gershon, and sometimes with Gershom. And do the chronologies of these three Levitical clans, do they match up from the Pentateuch through Chronicles?
Now we're in the deep waters of textual variation and priestly pedigree, right where the Torah gets most revealing. So first, Gershon versus Gershom. You're not seeing things. Both names appear across the Tanakh. But here's the rub. Gershon, with a final nun, is always one of Levi's three sons, alongside Kohath and Merari, while Gershom with a final mem is most often Moses' son. They look similar, but they function in different genealogical streams. Still, there's some confusion in the transmission, and the Septuagint even seems to conflate them in a few places, which tips us off that copyists and later editors might not have drawn hard lines between the two. Why the spelling variation? It likely boils down to linguistic drift and scribal tradition. Gershom may have originally been the older form, possibly meaning a sojourner there, reflecting Moses' alienation in Midian. Gershon, on the other hand, might be a dialectical variant, or even a later scribal regularization, as genealogies became more rigid in the priestly source. Now to the big question about genealogical discrepancies. Yes, absolutely. The genealogies in the Pentateuch and those in Chronicles don't always line up. Chronicles, writing from a post-exilic, temple-centered viewpoint, tries to clean up and reinforce the hierarchy of the Levites and Aaronites. It often adds generations, rearranges names, or even duplicates figures to validate specific Levitical roles, especially as they developed in the Second Temple period. So what we're likely seeing in both the name shifts and the genealogical oddities is the evolution of priestly identity over time, layered through different editorial lenses. The Pentateuch preserves older tribal traditions, while Chronicles retrofits them to match the needs of a reconstituted temple bureaucracy. In short, what looks like a name glitch or family tree error is really a window into the history of how Israel's priesthood legitimated itself across changing political and religious landscapes.
Now, the reason I wanted Ezra to weigh in on that, Jono, is because there is an idea that scholars pick up on, because we know that one of Moses's boys is named Gershom with an M. And there is this idea, and it's masked in the Masoretic text. In Judges, there's a particular text where the name is changed. Instead of the son of Moses, Gershom, the son of Moses, it's changed to Manasseh by simply adding a letter.
That's right.
You remember that in Judges 18, I think? And the whole point is there's some mixing going on with these priestly names, and Ezra, I would hold Ezra's feet to the fire if we had more time because of this. He says a lot of times when you see Gershom, it's this son of Moses. Yeah. But here's what I want to do is just a couple of these. 1 Chronicles 6, the sons of Levi, verse 1, Gershom with a mem, Kohath and Merari. And the footnote says, the Hebrew says Gershon. See, because what the Masoretic text has Gershon because it wants you to say, well, we can't have Gershom. His name wasn't Gershom, it was Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And then, but I just wanted to give people these in their notes. I won't go to them, but First Chronicles 6, verse 1 and 2, verse 16, verse 17, and then 1 Chronicles 23, 6 and 23, 15. Look at what is the name. Is it end with an M or a mem and or a noon? And so a lot of people have fun picking on New Testament genealogies. Oh, there's a mistake here. But it's the old endless genealogies. If you're looking in the Hebrew, just like Ezra said, we have some problems in these genealogies. Anyway, I thought that might be a segue to bring us into chapter 18, which is really focusing on the Aaronids.
It is, but before we get there, and while we're talking about oddities in the evolution of priestly identity over time, I do want to focus on 17 just for a second, because what we have in 17 in the English version, chapter 17 entirely, the New Oxford Annotated Bible. We like this one so much. One of the textbooks that people should get, refers to this whole section as says this story is best designated a legend with parallels in many cultures. But it would appear that the priestly writer has decided, hey, I like a bit of this. Let's apply this to Aaron and make him even specialer, right?
Yeah.
And but here's a question that I have for you, Ross, and let me just go back to my notes here. Okay, so look, what we have is Aaron's magic stick once again. Now you remember back in Exodus chapter 7 and Exodus chapter 8, it's even though Moses has a magic stick, Aaron also has a magic stick, and it's Aaron that that does the magic with the magic stick. So now he has his magic stick once again, and what is said is God instructs Moses, I think, go and get all the magic sticks. Speak to the Israelite people and take from them. Now listen, Ross, from the chieftain of their ancestral house, right?
Yep.
One staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all, right? Inscribe each man's name on his staff, there being one staff for each of the head of the ancestral house. Very, very clear. And then it says, also, by the way, inscribe Aaron's name on the staff of Levi.
Okay.
Now, my question is, do we have 13 staffs or do we have 12?
Is this a trick question?
It's a little bit of a trick question.
Okay, because so if Aaron's staff, Aaron's name is inscribed on the Levitical staff, then is that one of 12? And I don't know if we have enough information here, because do we then think, is it counting Joseph as Manasseh or Ephraim and Manasseh?
That's exactly what we're doing. Now, people don't think about this, and I don't know that I've seen, I haven't seen any study notes or commentary that address this topic. I'm sure they must exist, but I haven't seen them. Maybe you've seen them. But that is the question. The question is, hang on a minute, if we have 12, that means that we're dealing with the competing lists that include Joseph and Levi, right? If we have 13, well, then what we have for us is a list that comports to every single list prior to this moment. And what I mean by that is every single time that we talk about a list that has chieftains or leaders of those tribes, we're looking at chapter 1, verses 4 to 16. Manasseh and Ephraim are separate. Some of these, as I mentioned last week, some of these do have the Josephic envelope by which Ephraim and Manasseh are enclosed, and some of them don't. Last week, there was Ephraim was out of that envelope, but Manasseh was included in it. But nevertheless, we're not going to do that right now. But chapter 1, verses 4 to 16, we have chieftains, 12 of them that include Ephraim and Manasseh. Chapter 2, verses 2 to 33 does the same thing. Chapter 10, verses 22 to 23 does the same thing. Chapter 13, verses 2 to 3 and all the way to 15. Let me just read that for a second.
Okay.
Chapter 13, 2 to 3. Okay, so it says, chapter 13, send men to scout the land. Okay, this is about the 12 spies, land of Canaan, which I am giving to you, the Israelite people. Send one man from each of the ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them, right? So Moses, by the Lord's command, sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, all the men being leaders of the Israelites. And then it goes on, and we have 12, not including Levi. We have Ephraim and Manasseh, and they are designated a chieftain. Each of these lists has a chieftain for each tribe. Joseph doesn't include Levi, right? So we have chieftains. Now here, we're told that there are 12. We're led to believe, it's a little bit ambiguous, but we're led to believe that there are 12 sticks. One of them is Aaron for Levi, right? So the question becomes, who put their name on the stick for Joseph? Because if you have Levi, you have to use Joseph in order for them to be 12. Who did? Is it someone from Manasseh or is it someone from Ephraim? On the other hand, if there are 12 sticks like every other list that we see in Numbers, then Aaron is number 13. And the reason why I bring this up is because once again, we see that, now remember everyone, in the Moses Scroll, Levi is not treated as a tribe. Levi are those who have accompanied Israel, those who have attached themselves to Israel, those who are joined to Israel, if you like, that are not of the tribes of Israel. I'm going
to guess, just because I want to guess, and it was the first thing that came to my mind as you described that. Ezekiel 37 comes to mind, and I don't know if you can even connect it, but verse 15 and verse 16. Verse 16 says, take another stick and write on it for Joseph, parentheses, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with it. I mean, I just wonder if
That's good. Yeah.
I don't know, but it would fit into one of your categories. Then, in a way, you'd have if you had Levi with Aaron not having a separate rod, but riding on the Levitical rod, if you will, and then in this case, you'd have a Josephic envelope with Joseph being the tribe with the name on the stick. I don't know.
Yeah. But who of the chieftains wrote on the stick for the tribe of Joseph? Maybe, according to Ezekiel, maybe you might argue from that it's suggestive of Ephraim, but it doesn't say. So and that's also interesting because the previous list, just previous to this one, as I mentioned, Manasseh is the one that is in the Joseph envelope, the specific envelope. So it creates a problem. And really what is happening is that there is no list here. There's no list of chieftains. There's every other moment that we have to do this. We have names attached. We don't have it here because it wants to be ambiguous. It doesn't want you to think too much about it. But it certainly does seem to want to suggest that there are 12 sticks and that Levi is one of those. All right. Chapter 18, Ross. Now, you have heard me say, and I've said this a number of times, that I think when we were talking about Numbers chapter 10, where God eats Aaron's two sons, Nadab and Abihu, shortly after he does that, God speaks to Aaron directly and says, by the way, don't be drinking on the job. All right? Just remember that. And I said to everyone, I think this is the only time that God ever speaks to Aaron directly. Well, I was wrong.
Okay.
And right here in chapter 18 is the only other time. So there's actually two times that this happens. And the only other time is here in chapter 18. And it's chapter 18, verses 1 to 24. So previous Leviticus 10, 8 to 11, don't be drinking on the job. But here, 18, verse 1 to 24, quite a lot that he speaks to him about. What would you like to draw out of Numbers 18, Ross?
I am wide open. What jumps off the page at you? I think just from a general. Go ahead. I was just going to. Go ahead.
No, well, just further to what I was saying about the list in how many sticks are there in chapter 17. I love the way that it almost insists upon laundering Levi in as a tribe in verse 2. You shall also associate yourself with your kinsman, the tribe of Levi. It's talking to, again, Jehovah speaking to Aaron. Aaron and his sons, now make sure you associate yourself with the tribe of Levi, your ancestral tribe, the tribe of your father. Be attached, to be attached to you and to serve you, right?
Yeah.
Is what the priestly writer is writing. I find that curious. It just seems like they're trying too hard. It reminds me of the time when Moses is in front of the burning bush and Jehovah says to him, hey, you know what? You don't want to be the spokesman. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Aaron, Aaron, your brother, Aaron, who's a Levite.
Right.
It's trying too hard to include him. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. The thing about 18, as you pointed out with those comments, is that it really wants the reader to say, okay, if you were ever confused before, you let this take away any confusion. It is the group known as the sons of Aaron. This is the group. Leviticus 18 really kind of puts that in concrete, as we say. It scratches it in stone. You no longer, there's no way around it that and the book of Numbers is all about this. This is a treatise on how to elevate the sons of Levi and how to lower or subjugate the Levitical clans. Even the clan like Korah's, the Kohathites, their whole job is to carry the Ark of the Covenant and the holiest things. It says it 3 times very plainly. But the whole point of this chapter is to say, but no one can serve as a priest except the tribe of Levi. I mean,
Mm.
the descendants of
Aaron.
Aaron. And again, Deuteronomy knows nothing about that.
Yep, quite right. But, we're going to make it worth our while, Ross. Don't you worry about that. And the way that we're going to do that is from verse 21, and to the Levites I hereby give all the tithes in Israel as their share in return for the services that they perform. Now, remember, the reason why Levi are the special ones to begin with goes all the way back to Exodus, where it was Exodus, wasn't it? Where they, after the golden calf incident, they strapped on the sword and killed 3,000 of their brothers, we're expected to believe. And from that, God has designated that they will be the special ones. So they have no land. They can dwell in some cities, we're to understand, but they have, interestingly, this particular tribe has no tribal inheritance. Instead, the Israelites will basically send them their tax of 10%. And then it goes on to say, and by the way, you Levites, make sure you give the best of that tithe, 10% of that tithe. You tithe that tithe and give the best of it to whom? To the Aaronite priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the money.
I was just going to say, there's that one story of when Levi really gets appointed into this high position, and particularly the sons of Levi, the sons of Aaron. I think when you talk about the coming on the backside of the golden calf,
Mm-hmm.
but then in Leviticus, Deuteronomy chapter 10, we get a slightly different reason. So we'll get to that. But there are these different conflicting, within this Torah portion, it is competing Kohathites, conflicts between cousins. It is a very big fight going on, and it's a family feud, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Now, we are at the end of our Torah portion, Ross, and this brings us to chapter 19, which I've been waiting to get to because it's a little bit, always a little bit exciting, a little bit interesting, and particularly in light of recent events. Oh, my goodness. I tell you what, it's going to be back in the news again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guarantee it. Between now and then, we're going to see something in the news, and I'm going to be watching keenly for the latest on what? The red heifer.
The red heifer, yeah.
The red heifer. This is where we're going to pick up.
Yeah, we have to. Do we get to look ahead just a little bit to kind of make the point, kind of to wrap things up about?
Go ahead.
The sons of Kohath, even though in chapter 16, towards the end of that, we get the idea that all of this of Korah and his whole household and everybody was consumed and swallowed up by the earth. We get this interesting passage in chapter 26, beginning in verse 7.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "These are the clans of the Reubenites. The number of those enrolled was 43,000. Let me skip down. Yeah, look at verse 9. The descendants of Eliab, Nemuel, Dathan and Abiram. These are the same, Jono, Dathan and Abiram, chosen from the congregation, who rebelled against Moses and Aaron in the company of Korah when they rebelled against the Lord. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up along with Korah when that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a warning." Verse 11. "Notwithstanding, the sons of Korah did not die." And the reason that is interesting is because we thought they were dead, but this is beautiful story writing or a blend of sources. Either way, it turned out for the better, because now we find that there's actually that makes sense, because why would the children have to die because daddy, Korah, rebelled against Moses? Well, it depends on which source you read. In one source says, no, that's perfectly fine. That can happen. Another source says, no, it can't happen. Interestingly enough, we have these Psalms of Korah, and I just wanted to read one because here are the Psalms of the sons of Korah. I know that many of our viewers know this. Psalm 42 through 49, Psalm 84 and 85, and Psalm 87 and 88. But look with me at Psalm 84 and verse 10. In fact, let me get No, I'm going to read it. I can get there quicker. Let me just go to 8410. And this is an interesting passage. I think it's 8410. Is it 8410 that says,
O God, behold our shield, look upon the face of your anointed. Better one day in your courts than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather stand at the threshold of God's house than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord, is this where you're going?
Yeah, and the reason that's important is because it seems that this is one of the Psalms of the sons of Korah. It seems that if you take the story as it's given in the Pentateuch, that they wanted more, according to the priestly writers, they wanted more than was their job. But we learn later in the writings that the sons of Korah, not only did they survive and didn't get eaten by the earth, but they later became gatekeepers. And here is evidence that by the time that this psalm is written, that they're satisfied in their lot and they no longer desire the Aaronid priesthood. So everyone lives happily ever after. And isn't that a beautiful story?
There we go. That's good. That's a good way to end it. All right. Next week, Red Heifer. Looking forward to it. Watch the news between now and then because I guarantee there's going to be more spotlight on that particular. Because every year, Ross, we have a little bit more on that. Hukat is where we're going. And between now and then, dear viewers, enjoy. Have a great week. It's certainly a good start to it. And we'll see you then. Ezra, take us on out.
All right, friends. That wraps up this episode of Torah Pearls. We've gone toe-to-toe with Korah, sifted through priestly politics, and poked at some of those genealogy glitches that tell us more than meets the eye. If you enjoyed this dive into the depths of the text, don't forget to leave us a comment, share the episode with your fellow Tanakh sleuths, and hit that like button so the algorithm knows you're one of the Idah, the congregation. And next time, get ready. We're heading into one of the Torah's most enigmatic rites, the red heifer. Ritual purity, ashes, paradoxes. It's like Leviticus meets Kafka. Until then, keep your scrolls open and your questions coming. Shalom, and see you soon.